Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, our colleagues from the media. We want to thank you for braving to be here to grace the occasion of this special brief. Like we indicated last week, that every Monday we'll be giving you a special brief from this home of the revolution, the ZANU headquarters, where you have an opportunity to interface and interact with the acting spokesperson of the party, Comrade Patrick Chinamasa. So we thank you, the few that have come, and I must acknowledge Comrade Chef. We have brought a few ones in line with the new restrictions and regulations that we have under COVID, directives. So it's quite unfortunate we have brought them few, but I'm sure the rest of them will be able to see them as time proceeds. So the acting spokesperson of the party will be giving you a special brief on a subject that is, touched the stone for poor readers and for less thinkers and those who are not really essentially schooled into understanding the history of the land revolution in Zimbabwe. So he's a myth buster. He will be dealing with the myths that have surrounded discussions across the length and breadth of the country on the compensation issue with regards to the land and the developments thereof. So without wasting much of his time, Comrade Spokesperson, it is over to you, sir.
No, thank you very much. I want to welcome once again members of the Fourth Estate who have braved to come to this press conference. I understand that because of the COVID restrictions, it has not been possible for many to make it. But I want to believe that those who could not make it will follow this press conference electronically. So I thank you very much, those who have made it possible to come. I am going to give a statement on the global compensation agreement which was signed last week with respect to compensation on improvements. I also take the opportunity in my statement to comment on very uninformed statement by Julius Malema of South Africa. Before I read my statement, I felt that I should make reference to the events that took place or preceded the 31st July. As all of you are aware, over the last 6 months or so, the MDC Alliance has been organizing to put hooligans and foreign trained agents onto our streets with the aim to inflict violence and cause mayhem on the people of Zimbabwe. And the aim, of course, was that this would destabilize our republic. And the intention was to repeat what they did on the 1st of August 2018 and also on the 14th to the 16th January last year. Essentially to cause violence with a view to achieving regime change. All this, of course, is not of their own making. They are just agents. They are just agents of foreign interests who have never forgiven us for the revolutionary stance that we took on the land issue. So I thought I should take this opportunity to thank our people, the Zimbabwe people, for heeding our call to remain peaceful. Your behavior was exemplary. And as we go into the future, please never become complicit to agents and merchants of violence who want to turn our country into Libya. See what is happening in Libya. We should never be complicit to any machinations that want to turn our country into a Libya. It's not a one-day wonder. Once you destabilize, once you don't have peace, you destabilize your revolutionary progression. Peace is a prerequisite to economic empowerment to development. Without peace, you spend 10 years and you destroy whatever little that we've been able to achieve in the years that have gone by. And I want to make this clear that ZANU PF will never surrender power to foreign funded and sponsored malcontents. We have a revolutionary mandate from the people to deliver total economic emancipation. And I want to make Zimbabweans aware that total economic emancipation does not come overnight. And also it does not come without sweat. It does not come without setbacks. From time to time, you have setbacks. But as a revolutionary party, we remain focused on our goal to achieve total economic emancipation for our people. I thought I should thank you for heeding our call to remain peaceful. Allow me now to read my statement, which is the subject matter of this press conference. ZANU PF gives thumbs up and supports His Excellency, Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa, and the ZANU PF government for concluding the Global Compensation Agreement with organizations representing former white commercial farmers. The agreement was signed on 30th July 2020, and it provides principally the following. First, it provides an agreed global sum of 3.5 billion United States dollars for the compensation on improvements on land, which we compulsorily acquired under the Land Reform Program. It being noted that the agreement was preceded by a joint evaluation of these improvements by government and representatives of the consortium representing former commercial white farmers. The evaluation exercise has not been an overnight thing. It took many years of building trust and confidence between government and farmers' organizations. Secondly, this global compensation agreement provides a measured time frame within which the debt is to be liquidated. It also provides modalities on mobilizing the necessary resources locally and globally to pay compensation for the improvements. And also, there is an unwritten underlying understanding that the farmers' organizations which are party to the agreement and their constituent members will cease being hostile elements against Zimbabwe and its people, internally, regionally, and internationally. In other words, from now on, our expectations as ZANU PF is that we now move as one people, irrespective of color or creed. ZANU PF wishes it known worldwide that the agreement just concluded has its total blessings and full support. ZANU PF considers the agreement a milestone and a significant phase in its march towards the attainment of President Mnangagwa's Vision 2030 and the achievement of the goal of total economic emancipation of the people of Zimbabwe. It is a landmark consolidation of the gains of our revolution. In our long journey towards total empowerment and independence, the people of Zimbabwe must not lose sight or memory of the difficult revolutionary decisions ZANU PF took on their behalf, and I point out and remind them of just about 3 difficult decisions that we've taken in our journey along the revolutionary path. The first difficult decision we took was when the 2 revolutionary parties, ZAPU and ZANU, took decisions in 1963 to mount an armed struggle to regain our land, freedom, our sovereignty, our independence, and our human rights, which had been trampled upon by colonizers, George Floyd style. You know, motivating people to lose their lives is not an easy decision. It's a very difficult decision. And that decision, the revolutionary parties, ZAPU and ZANU, took that decision. And the core grievance motivating the armed struggle was the land question. The colonial brutality that accompanied the dispossession of our land and the broad daylight theft of our cattle and livestock were events still fresh in the minds of the dispossessed and their descendants. Many sons and daughters of Zimbabwe have paid the supreme sacrifice during the armed struggle, and they lost many lives. Also, to remind you that in the 17 years of protracted armed struggle, this forced the colonizing power and its local agents, the white settler community, to the negotiating table in 1979, and they agreed to surrender power to the indigenous population at the Lancaster House Conference. At this conference, the liberation movements, ZANU and ZAPU, under the banner of the Patriotic Front, and following undertakings by the British and the USA governments to make resources available for compensating white settler farmers for the land, we agreed, again, took a very difficult decision. We agreed as revolutionary parties to take a step back, maybe two, to postpone resolution of the land question for 10 years after independence, during which time the British and the American governments were to provide resources for the acquisition of land for resettlement purposes on a willing seller, willing buyer basis. Come the expiry of the 10 years in 1990, the willing buyer, willing seller is a basis for redressing a historical injustice had failed to achieve the intended purpose. When Zimbabwe called upon the British government to make available the resources, the conservative government, I must point out, first under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and then under Prime Minister John Major, cooperated and reached an understanding on a time-framed agreement to provide the resources to allow for payment of compensation for both land and improvements under a scheme of compulsory acquisition of land. And constitutional amendments were actually effected along those lines to align our constitutional position with the promises that we were being given by the conservative governments. But the conservatives lost an election, and the British Prime Minister Tony Blair, the leader of the Labour Party, reneged on this agreement, and instead, under the Westminster's Foundation, founded and funded the MDC with the primary and sole purpose to oppose the land redistribution program and to effect regime change. This was a very sad situation where you have governments reneging on promises and undertakings made by their predecessors. And I need to point out here that in our case, when we took over at independence, we honored the commitments made by Ian Smith government, including commitments that had to do with military hardware which had caused havoc in our camps, the aeroplanes, the bombs. We honored those commitments. But here we have a British Prime Minister deciding not to honor the commitments made by the conservative government. And it's a sad chapter in the history of the British. So following the British reneging on their commitments, our revolutionary party, ZANU-PF, took again an important and difficult step in our struggle for total and complete economic emancipation and freedom of our people. ZANU-PF took a decision to compulsorily acquire in excess of 11 million hectares of land for redistribution to the landless and to pay compensation for improvements only and not for land. When ZANU-PF took this revolutionary decision, we all sighed and said, and I want to quote, "We have crossed the Rubicon and damn the consequences." Indeed, the consequences were still soon to follow. In reaction to the revolutionary decision, two groups emerged from our midst and trooped and globe-trotted to the Western capitals, including the white Commonwealth countries, Australia and Canada. And these two groups which emerged from our midst to globetrot are, firstly, the farmers' organizations, in particular the Commercial Farmers Union of Zimbabwe and the Southern African Commercial Farmers Alliance, Zimbabwe. The Southern African Commercial Farmers Alliance is mostly in the southern part of the province of Zimbabwe, to do with farmers who are into livestock farming. These two organizations went abroad and asked for two things from their kith and kin. They asked that there be military invasion of Zimbabwe to stop and reverse the land redistribution program, which we had embarked upon, which had been embarked upon by the Revolutionary Party, ZANU-PF. And they also said, if that failed, please impose sanctions so that you make, and I quote, you make Zimbabwe's economy scream. Tony Blair contemplated military invasion, and I want to put this in public for the public record. Were it not for former President Thabo Mbeki, who intervened by way of refusing military bases for the invasion of this country would have been attacked by Blair. So President Thabo Mbeki, we thank him for saving our people. As a reaction, Mr. Blair persuaded the European Union and the white Commonwealth countries and the United States to impose sanctions on Zimbabwe. These sanctions remain to this day. As they globe-trotted the storyline of the Commercial Farmers Union and the South African Commercial Farmers Alliance Zimbabwe, to their kith and kin was, and I quote, "Our land has been stolen by the natives. Help us to regain our land, and please teach the natives a big lesson." Another group which emerged in reaction to our revolutionary decision to embark on the land reform program was the MDC, which was founded and funded by the Westminster Foundation, and it also took to the skies and globe-trotted to Western capitals, asking for military invasion against the people of Zimbabwe, and also demanding imposition of sanctions in order to stop and reverse the revolutionary land redistribution program. The MDC storyline, as they globe-trotted, was, and I quote, "Our master's land has been stolen by our fellow natives. They are bad people, these fellow natives. Help us to restore the land stolen to our masters." The conclusion of the Global Compensation Agreement is therefore, in our struggle, a giant step of historic proportions towards consolidation of the gains of our revolution. And I say so in these respects. First, it is an acceptance by the white commercial farmers that with respect to compensation for land, they should look elsewhere and not to the people of Zimbabwe, nor to the government of Zimbabwe. As a matter of fact, in terms of Section 72, subsection 7 of our Constitution, the obligations to pay compensation for land has been placed squarely on the shoulders of the former colonial power, the British. Secondly, this is an aspect arising from the Global Compensation Agreement. By agreeing on the amount of compensation for improvements and the time frame for payment and the modalities for raising the resources, ZANU-PF wishes it to be known that it no longer considers the Commercial Farmers Union and the Southern Commercial Farmers Alliance Zimbabwe to be anti-land redistribution program, and it therefore calls upon these organizations to demand the unconditional lifting of sanctions. As we go into the future, ZANU-PF expects the voice of these two organizations, which are signatories to the Global Compensation Agreement, in calling for the unconditional lifting of sanctions. Our expectations is that their voice will be loud, clear, and unambiguous. Another issue arising from this agreement, there is a remaining counter-revolutionary force in our midst, still calling for the continuation and intensification of sanctions against Zimbabwe and its people. And this counter-revolutionary force is the MDC Alliance and its running dogs in the NGOs and evil societies affiliated to it. ZANU-PF says to the MDC Alliance and its vocal anti-people leaders that now that the people of Zimbabwe have reached a settlement with your masters, what still remains your cause? Why are you still in the trenches on behalf of your masters? We have reached an understanding with your masters. Please come out of the trenches, and we are calling upon you, the remnants of the splitting MDC alliances, to do one and only one patriotic thing in your lives. Please call for the unconditional lifting of sanctions against our people. I cannot conclude this press conference without making a comment on the noises from south of Limpopo, coming from none other than the G40 aligned EFF led by Julius Malema. Unhappily, he has swallowed hook, sink, and line the misinformation and disinformation fed to him by G40 labels who are exiled there, and whom I must point out are rebels without a cause. For the education of Mr. Malema and his moribund band, they must know that firstly, they are not Zimbabwe's official opposition party. We have enough headache from the foreign recruited and funded MDC opposition and these foreign funded NGOs who, for the information of the public, foreign funded NGOs in this country number in excess of 5,000. And this is in a country, a small country such as ours, which has a population of not more than 15 million, I beg your pardon. So it's very clear we are not short of enemies by reason of our revolutionary stance on behalf of the people and all oppressed people of the world. So we said to Julius Malema, don't add the EFF to the list of our enemies. We have one too many enemies. Mr. Malema, you have a tendency of using your loud mouth to speak on subjects you know nothing about. You have not bothered to read our constitution. For the record, our current constitution was approved in a national referendum and by Parliament in 2013. ZANU-PF, for the information of Mr. Malema, the current in bringing about the current constitution, both in terms of campaigning during the referendum and approval in Parliament, ZANU-PF and the MDC collaborated in that endeavor. But as soon as the MDC lost the 2013 harmonized elections, the neo-colonial mentality of the MDC reasserted itself, and they lost their memories, and they retained calling for the continuation and intensification of illegal sanctions to achieve regime change and a reversal of the land redistribution program, forgetting that the policy of the land question had been entrenched in Section 72 of our Constitution. We have photographs, which I will not disclose now, when they globe-trotted Chamisa and Biti to the United States, the U.S. Foreign Relations Committee, meeting Mr. Jeff Flake, chairman of that committee, calling for the intensification of illegal sanctions against Zimbabwe. We take this as one of many setbacks, one of many pitfalls that our revolution has had to encounter. And as I pointed out before, in a revolution, sometimes you take one or two steps back. A revolutionary path is never a straight line. And the biblical trek of the Israelites from Egypt to the promised land, New Canaan, epitomizes a great many revolutionary journeys. There are those who would not take or suffer the pain and deprivations encountered on the journey, and they wanted to go back to oppression. In the case of the Israelites, to Egypt. In the case of our MDC, they wanted to go to Rhodesia. They are so young that they don't even know what oppression was in Rhodesia. So clearly, they have no yardstick by which they can compare. They were so young, they don't know what people of my generation went through. But anyway, they make the cries, and their education has not helped them to read history correctly. And obviously, even if they are given the books, they don't want to read anything of the sort. So perhaps unwittingly, the EFF under Julius Malema's leadership wants to take the people of Zimbabwe back to the era of oppression. In the case of the cause of black South Africans, the EFF, by breaking ranks from the ANC, has helped to undermine the cause of the revolution of black South African people. And I want to say this to Mr. Julius Malema. Making inflammatory speeches and donning red worksuits and berets do not make a revolution. A true revolutionary, which, by the way, you are not, first and foremost would acquaint himself with the concrete situation he is facing and would plot step by step the tactics and strategies on how he can attain his revolutionary goal. By breaking ranks from the ANC, and we don't know who is funding you, you temporarily destabilized and weakened the black South Africans' march towards total economic emancipation and independence. I use the word temporarily. You'll never succeed to weaken completely the cause of the black South Africans in their march towards total economic emancipation and independence. In a revolution or unity of all progressive forces is imperative. Mr. Malema, you chose the path of disunity. And what have you achieved besides making noises? Nothing. So ZANU-PF says to Mr. Julius Malema and his EFF, for God's sake, stop poking your G40-scented nose in Zimbabwe's domestic affairs. I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Spokesperson. I think the message has been read out very clearly for those that had been misinformed and disinformed by, agents of fake news. The matter has been clarified from the Revolutionary Party side, and the acting spokesperson have given you exactly the facts as they stand, to the extent that for the first time, we are now walking towards the same direction and in the same thinking cap with our former foes, in as far as the land reform is concerned, the former white farmers, so towards ensuring that we amplify calls for the removal of sanctions. Another key message coming down to Limpopo, that Julius Malema must mind issues South Africa. He has no local standard to comment on Zimbabwean issues, which is historically and schooled on, foundationally, distant, and existentially uncalled for. So certainly, I don't need to waste any much time. It is the opportunity where we'll invite one or two questions from members of the fourth estate who are here present. Except the majority of them, we are now aware of them. You can just proceed by asking the comrade spokesperson if there is any question on clarifications. Please proceed.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Spokesperson. My question is on regard with is.
Speak aloud. May you amplify your voice so that.
Well, thank you. My question is in line with what you just said, that the EFF of late has been very vocal and active on Zimbabwean issues. And does that, by your statements, were you by any means insinuating that they have become, a mouthpiece for the G40, which have now, most of them are now staying in the...
Yes, I'm not insinuating. I'm telling it as it is. The G40 and Julius Malema EFF are sleeping in the same bed. They are now, Malema has now made G40's cause his cause, and is forgetting that he is an opposition in the South African parliament. He now thinks, because they are sleeping together day in, day out, he now thinks that is an official opposition in Zimbabwe. He is not. And that is the message I'm delivering to him. As you are aware, clearly he has been misinformed. He has been trying to draw comparisons, false comparisons between our stance on land issue when we embarked on land reform program in 2000 and the global agreement. There is no departure from our revolutionary path. The direction remains the same. We took a decision in 2000 to acquire land compulsorily and not to pay compensation for land, but to pay compensation for improvements only. That position has been entrenched in section 72 of our constitution, and that position remains the same. When the position was entrenched in our constitution in 2013, our leader then was President Mugabe. So it's not as if we have reinvented the wheel. So I thought I should clarify that misinformation, disinformation from the G40 elements who are exiled in South Africa.
Yes. And on that note, thank you. On that note,
is that a follow-up?
Yes, it's a follow-up.
Okay.
Yes, on that note, we understand that the EFF as an opposition party in South Africa are yet to fully contribute towards a land reform exercise down there in South Africa, but already they are commenting on issues in Zimbabwe. What does that make of Julius Malema?
Yes, I make a point here that when he is a revolutionary and he pretends he is a revolutionary, he wants to himself to be known. This is why he wears worker suits, red suits, beret. They even go to parliament, I believe, wearing workers' suits. You understand? He wants to be known as a revolutionary. But I'm giving him a bit of advice. A true revolutionary is not just about making inflammatory speeches. It's not just about making noises. A true revolutionary will sit down, understand the prevailing concrete situation, and then build alliances, work out strategies and tactics on how you can achieve your revolutionary goal. Malema has no time for that. Maybe has never been schooled in any revolution. He must go back to the ANC to learn and to be told how revolutions are effected. They are not effected through speeches only. You sit down, you build alliances, you then work step by step, and the path you will find out when he does that is not clear, it's not straight, it's not a straight line. And you may put timelines, but sometimes there are necessities which require you to take steps back, 1 or 2, even 3 steps back, in order to plod on your revolutionary path. That Malema, I'm advising him, he must learn to do that. But above all, he must stop poking his nose into our affairs.
Well, a very, very emphatic and unambiguous message to Julius Malema or whoever comes from the EFF. It is very clear the spokesperson is saying Julius Malema cannot even qualify to be a branch member under ZANU because it's not revolutionary, it's counter-revolutionary. But your last question, please.
Yeah. There are people who are castigating Commander Agriculture. How fair is it?
You know, what you need to understand is that when we embarked on the land question, we gave out in excess of 11 million hectares of land to people who did not have resources. That you must understand. And as government, we took a decision for the first time to say we'll support, as you know, there were different schemes under the land reform program. We had the A1, which are 5 hectares or thereabouts, mostly targeting the peasant population. We had the self-contained, in between 20 hectares, self-contained, 20, 30, 40, 50 hectares, self-contained A1. Then we had the A2, which were large scale, in excess of 80 up to 500 hectares and so on. Now, we then realized that none of the classes of people we had benefited under the land reform had the necessary resources to make the land productive. But the revolution had to go on. We had to empower them, which is the whole purpose of why we have embarked on a revolution. We want to empower our people. Those who like, those who don't like, they can go elsewhere and be empowered by the British. We have no problem. It's their choice. They can go, and in fact already we are encountering people who do not look to government and Zimbabwe to be empowered. They would rather go and be empowered by the American government, the British, the Europeans. And what is the source of their empowerment? They are given allowances, some are bought houses, we believe.
500,000 actually disappeared on 31 July.
Some, in fact, are here in the November, on the last week, 31st, a lot of money, 500,000 US, went into people's pockets, which did not achieve even the intended result. It's a form of empowerment. It's a form of empowerment, but one which is, should I say, a sellout. You see, they are being treasonous in the form that they are being empowered. You understand? They are traitors to their own people. But those who are clever will be empowered. They will have a house which they didn't have. They will have a bicycle which they didn't have. They will have a motor vehicle which they didn't have. But in Zimbabwe, those who are beneficiaries of the land reform program, we chose to empower them through various government-funded and guaranteed schemes. Presidential Input Scheme, Cotton Presidential Input Scheme, Command Agriculture. And the Command Agriculture basically was on a basis that the farmers will pay. In the event that they failed, government guaranteed to pay the default on those inputs. That is how we propose to pay, and we don't apologize. And don't ask us to apologize. I understand now that the Command Agriculture is now being bankrolled by a bank under Smart Agriculture. During the past years, the banks were not supporting agriculture because they said there is no collateral. Of course, it was hypocritical on the part of our banks here. They said, we have no collateral, we are therefore not going to fund it, which is why the burden of funding agriculture is largely fallen on the government. But I say hypocritical on the part of the banks then, I don't know now, is that we are aware, ZANU-PF is aware that our commercial banks have been bankrolling white farmers who own no land, who are leasing from black farmers, and who therefore have no collateral. They are basically bankrolling them. So what it means is that they were not ready, the commercial banks here, they are not ready to empower the indigenous population. And in some respects, the indigenous population itself is not yet ready to be empowered. They don't know what empowerment is. They look at empowerment as being given sweets and beer. And they look for benefits which are overnight benefits. What we, ZANU-PF, is committed to doing is to educate our population that we are committed to empowering them. And on that one, we will not go back. We want this country, the economy of this country, to be in black hands, in fact and in spirit. We want to be like any normal economy worldwide, where 90% or so of the economy is owned by the indigenous population. That is the route we are going. And we are going to unfold many schemes to ensure that those who are willing to be empowered will be empowered. Those who choose to be empowered by the Europeans, we cannot stand in their way. But they should not criticize when they see the results of those who have empowered here are better than their own results. They feel that sleeping in hotels and holding workshops and being paid sitting allowances is empowerment. They spend years and years sleeping in hotels and eating breakfast in hotels and so forth. At the end of the day, they look and see the people we have empowered, they look empowered. And they become jealous. That's what it's all about, jealous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Spokesperson. Point quite very clear here. The party has no regrets for supporting indigenous patriotic business people in order to ensure that we survive our people and achieve total economic emancipation for our people. We have seen that so many times, Comrade Spokesperson, and I'm sure the public has been schooled on why it is imperative that we celebrate our successful business people. And you know, those who want, as the Comrade Spokesperson has said, those who want to be empowered by the white, you fly, you know where the whites are.
Don't forget that when we embarked on the land reform program, the MDC and its supporters decided not to participate. They lobbied their people because they were opposing. There was no way they could have participated. They decided and lobbied their people not to participate. And they did so on the instruction of the British and the Americans. Now, 20 years later, they realize they made a mistake. The British and the Americans have not empowered them. Even up to now, they are still making the mistake that they think that the British and the Americans will come to empower them. They will not. They have themselves to regret. Only one or few of their leaders broke ranks with them. Professor Walshman Ncube broke ranks with them and benefited under the Land Reform Program. Yes, he did. And there were many others also. Some even decided to leave the MDC because of the stance it took on refusing to be empowered. They thought that position was foolish, unpatriotic, traitorous, treasonous. Now, 20 years later, they come and they feel jealous when they see people who have been empowered by their own governments. ZANU PF will not make any apologies for empowering our own people. If we had resources, we want the mining sector to be better organized. What we see currently is artisanal mining. We wish they were well equipped with machinery, appropriate technology to do proper mining. That's the way we want to do. And in all sectors, like I said, we want Zimbabweans to own this economy. And when we make this call, we make no apologies. When we adopt policies and we deploy resources to empower people to take commanding heights of the economy in tourism, in agriculture, in manufacturing, in mining, we make no apologies. Thank you very much.
No need for any further explanation there. Thank you very much, Comrade Spokesperson. Thank you, members from the 4th Estate, for coming to grace this occasion.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.